The air in Synapse Prime buzzed with the kind of energy you'd find in a nest of particularly neurotic hornets. Everyone looked like they had something to say, and none of it was good. The skyline was a jagged mess of neural spires, each one glowing with the intellect of 1,000 different species, all united in mutual distrust. Doctor. Leora Vex couldn't help but feel out of place, like a solitary human in a sea of brains that thought too much of themselves. She stood on the balcony of her apartment, high above the city's writhing streets, peering through the thick haze of neon smog. It was the kind of view that inspired existential dread, or, at the very least, a healthy case of agoraphobia. "You know, if you squint just right," she said to nobody in particular, her voice tinged with that familiar brand of sardonic amusement. "It almost looks like the whole city's flipping us off." An artificial intelligence, programmed only slightly less sarcastically than Leora herself, chimed in through her neural implant. "Perhaps it's a reflection of the current diplomatic climate, Doctor." "Oh, please, Spindle," Leora replied, rolling her eyes. "Can we skip the psychoanalysis today? I'm not in the mood to be judged by a sentient calculator." Spindle, undeterred by her barbs, continued. "The Galactic Council meeting is about to start. Might I remind you, you're expected to defend humanity's honor. Or, what's left of it." Leora sighed and flicked the mental switch that connected her consciousness to the meeting space. The sensation was akin to being dropped into a vat of ice water, if the ice water was sentient and judging your life choices. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Most of them looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, probably sipping cocktails on a beach planet devoid of sentient life. The whispers were louder than usual, a collective anxiety hanging in the air like a bad smell. "Ladies and gentle beings," announced the chairman, a gelatinous blob of a creature whose existence made Leora question the wisdom of evolution. "We are gathered here to discuss the pressing matter of the new galactic plague." "Pressing matter," Leora muttered under her breath. "More like pressing our luck." A tall, angular figure with eyes that could cut glass stood up. This was Ambassador Xylox, known for his fondness for drama and his disdain for humans. "It has come to our attention," Xylox began, his voice dripping with the kind of venom that would make a snake blush, "that the humans are the source of this plague." Leora smirked. "And here I thought we humans had stopped being the galaxy's favorite scapegoat." Xylox's gaze landed on her, sharp as a laser scalpel. "Doctor Vex, perhaps you can enlighten us as to why your species insists on being such an existential threat." Leora leaned back in her seat, feigning indifference. "Last I checked, Ambassador, we were just trying to keep up with you lot. But hey, when you have a galaxy full of overachievers, someone's gotta play the villain, right?" The chamber buzzed with a mixture of outrage and reluctant amusement. It wasn't the first time Leora had to defend her species with a smile and a middle finger. "It's true," she continued, her tone shifting to something more serious. "We don't know the origins of this plague, but blaming us without evidence, that's a pretty lazy accusation even for you, Xylox." The chairman wobbled in place, a gesture that Leora had learned to interpret as irritation. "Doctor Vex, we need actionable insights, not your brand of humor." "Well, Chairman," Leora said, her patience wearing thin, "if I had a credit for every time someone in this room wasted my time with baseless allegations, I'd be living on a private asteroid sipping antimatter martinis." Xylox sneered. "We do have evidence, Doctor." The room went silent, the kind of silence that usually precedes a very bad day. Leora's heart did a little jig of dread. "Evidence?" she echoed, her voice suddenly less sure. Xylox gestured and a holographic screen materialized. On it were images of a human laboratory, its sterile halls now a breeding ground for chaos and contagion. It was like a bad galactic soap opera, only with more mucus. "This facility was found on the outskirts of your human colony on Kepler 22b, Xylox explained, a smugness in his tone that made Leora want to punch him through the digital void. She squinted at the images. Damn, doesn't exactly scream innocent, does it? The chairman's voice cut through the tension like a rusted knife. Dr. Vex, we require a thorough investigation. Until then, humanity's status in this council is precarious. Leora huffed, turning off her connection. The real world came rushing back, complete with the comforting grime of her living quarters. Well, Spindle, looks like we're public enemy number one again. Spindle hummed thoughtfully. You do have a talent for making friends, Doctor. Standing there, contemplating the fate of her people, Leora felt the kind of determination that usually precedes terrible decisions. Looks like I need to do some field work. Time to pack my bags, and my cynicism. The AI response was practically dripping with cheer. I'll prepare the travel itinerary, Doctor. And might I suggest something with a high alcohol content for the journey? You're a mind reader, Spindle. With a plan forming in her mind and sarcasm as her trusty sidearm, Leora stepped away from the balcony, ready to face the universe's latest attempt to ruin her day, and possibly her entire species. Hey, if we're going down, she muttered to herself, we might as well go down fighting, preferably with a witty one-liner. With that, she set off to where all good stories begin, at the edge of certain doom, armed with nothing but a questionable sense of humor and a rapidly dwindling sense of optimism. Doctor. Leora Vex stood in her apartment, staring at the holographic mess on her desk. It was a universal truth that whenever you needed to find something, your desk would transform into the Bermuda Triangle of clutter. Spindle, ever the helpful AI, hummed in her mind like an annoyingly upbeat song that gets stuck in your head. Doctor. Vex, if you're searching for a will to live, I suggest looking elsewhere, Spindle quipped. Actually, I'm looking for my sanity, Leora muttered, pushing aside a stack of reports on alien bacteria that had as much relevance now as a floppy disk in a digital age. But if you find it, do let me know. The holographic interface blinked insistently, signaling an incoming message. It was cryptic, devoid of sender details, and stank of the kind of mystery that usually ends with someone getting stabbed in the back or the front, depending on the stabber's mood. Ah, a mystery admirer, Leora mused. Or maybe just an admirer of mysteries. The message was brief, concise, and offered the kind of ominous advice that would make fortune cookies seem like the works of Shakespeare. The truth behind the plague is closer than you think. Follow the circuitry. Follow the circuitry, Leora echoed. Sounds like the worst self-help book ever. Or a very niche travel guide, added Spindle. Shall I book us a tour? Leora ignored the AI sass and stared at the message, her mind clicking into overdrive. The plague was a disaster wrapped in a catastrophe with a soundtrack of galactic paranoia. And now she was supposed to unravel it all with nothing but a vague hint and her trademark sarcasm. Spindle, do we have any leads on this circuitry business? Leora asked, already regretting her decision to play detective. None that won't lead us to a disappointing mix of dead ends and existential dread, Spindle replied. But I can cross-reference known locations of interest with high-tech facilities. Great, Leora sighed. Let's add Wild Goose Chase to our itinerary. As she mulled over the cryptic message, the news feed in her apartment flickered to life, broadcasting the latest from the Galactic Council. It seemed the universe had decided that humans needed to be both the scapegoat and the entertainment for the weak. In response to recent accusations, restrictions have been placed on human activities within Synapse Prime, the sleek, tentacled anchor announced, her tone a perfect blend of practiced neutrality and thinly veiled disdain. Humans are advised to remain in designated areas until further notice. Designated areas, Leora snorted. Like we're contagious or something. To be fair, Doctor, the galaxy isn't wrong to see humans as a highly infectious form of chaos, Spindle chimed in. Though personally, I find your brand of chaos oddly endearing. Touching, Spindle, Leora replied dryly. Now let's see if we can figure out how to use that chaos to clear our name. The city of Synapse Prime, already a cauldron of distrust, had taken the news about humanity's supposed plague-launching prowess with all the grace of a drunk space pirate. The streets were filled with tension, species eyeing each other with suspicion, but saving their sharpest glares for the humans unlucky enough to cross their path. Walking down the street, Leora felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her back, none of them friendly. She'd never been particularly popular, but this was a new level of scrutiny. "Hey, human!" shouted a voice from a nearby hover kiosk. The vendor, a reptilian creature with scales that shimmered in the artificial light, grinned with too many teeth. "Care for some non-infectious snacks?" Leora forced a smile. "Tempting, but I've got a strict diet of sarcasm and skepticism." The vendor laughed, a hissing sound that could have been interpreted as dangerous or just bad humor. "Good luck with that." Ignoring the unsolicited dietary advice, Leora moved on, her mind a whirl of half-formed plans and sarcastic retorts. The cryptic message lingered in the back of her mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. As she turned a corner, she nearly collided with a group of council enforcers, their uniforms imposing and their expressions set to grumpy. Leora offered a tight-lipped nod, hoping to avoid yet another round of interrogation. "Vex," one of them barked, his voice as warm and inviting as a snowstorm. "We need to have a word." "Why, officer," Leora said, her voice dripping with faux charm, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" The leader of this dreary bunch, a bulky creature with a face that looked like it had been sculpted by a particularly vengeful artist, frowned. "Just following orders, ma'am. We're to make sure you're complying with the new restrictions." Leora held up her hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of a galaxy-sized misunderstanding. No need to put me on house arrest." The officer grunted, unimpressed. "See that you do. We wouldn't want any incidents." "Incidents?" Leora echoed. "I can assure you if there's an incident, it'll be entirely intentional." The officers moved on, leaving Leora standing in the street, her mood swinging between irritation and resolve. Synapse Prime had always been a city that thrived on tension, but now it felt like a powder keg with a particularly itchy detonator. Spindle broke the silence in her mind. "I took the liberty of analyzing potential locations related to your cryptic message. One site stands out, a decommissioned research lab on the city's outskirts." "Decommissioned? That means sketchy, right?" Leora mused, more to herself than to Spindle. "In human terms, yes. It also means off the grid, which could explain the hidden truth angle," Spindle replied. "A perfect location for clandestine activities." "Well then," Leora said with a wry grin, "looks like we're going to become urban explorers. Hope you brought your flashlight." As night fell over Synapse Prime, Leora made her way to the outskirts of the city, the neon glow of the skyline fading into the shadows. The research lab was exactly what she expected, a monument to outdated technology and broken promises, wrapped in a thick blanket of dust and abandonment. "Spindle, remind me why we're breaking into a creepy old lab," Leora whispered, glancing around at the darkened structure. "Because you're irresistibly drawn to bad decisions, Doctor," Spindle replied cheerfully. "And because we might find something that will save humanity from becoming the galaxy's favorite scapegoat." "Right, saving humanity. No pressure," Leora muttered, moving cautiously through the crumbling entrance. The interior was a maze of dark corridors, each one more foreboding than the last. Leora's footsteps echoed in the silence like the lead-up to a bad horror movie. The air was thick with the scent of neglect and something else, something that hinted at recent activity. "Spindle, scan for any active systems," Leora instructed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scanning," Spindle replied, the mental hum of its processing a reassuring presence in the oppressive silence. "There are faint energy signatures deeper inside. Someone's been here recently." "Or something," Leora corrected, squinting into the shadows. "With our luck, it's probably something." Navigating the labyrinthine halls, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It wasn't paranoia if you were actually being followed after all. "Doctor, I detect movement," Spindle warned, a note of urgency lacing its usual sarcasm. "No kidding," Leora breathed, pressing herself against the wall and peering around the corner. There in the dim light she saw it, a figure, humanoid but with a distinctly alien silhouette. It moved with a purpose that suggested it wasn't here for sightseeing. "Looks like we've got company," Leora muttered. "Guess it's time to make friends." "Your charm is legendary, Doctor," Spindle noted. "Just remember this isn't a social call." Leora took a deep breath, stepping into the open. "Hello there. Can I interest you in a shared moment of mutual confusion?" The figure froze, then turned slowly, revealing a face that was more machine than flesh, a network of circuitry visible beneath translucent skin. "You're not supposed to be here," it said, its voice a cold, mechanical whisper. Leora shrugged, adopting her best nonchalant stance. "Neither are you, I'd wager. But here we are breaking all the rules together." The cyborg regarded her with an unreadable expression. "Why have you come?" "Let's just say I'm on a quest for truth, justice, and the galactic way," Leora replied. "Though I'd settle for just the truth at this point." The cyborg tilted its head as if weighing her words. "If you're looking for truth, you're in the wrong place. This facility holds only lies." "Funny," Leora said, smirking. "I've found that lies often lead to the truth if you follow them far enough." The cyborg seemed to consider this, then gestured towards a corridor that seemed no different than the others. "Follow me," it said, turning with a grace that belied its mechanical nature. "See, Spindle. All you need is a little charm," Leora whispered, following her unexpected guide. "Your definition of charm is as questionable as ever, Doctor," Spindle replied, its digital voice tinged with amusement. The cyborg led Leora through the dim corridors to a chamber that hummed with energy, the walls lined with ancient servers and flickering screens. It was a control room of sorts, abandoned yet somehow alive. "This facility was once used by your species," the cyborg explained, its gaze fixed on the glowing monitors. "A research station for biological weapons long before the plague. And now?" Leora asked, moving closer to inspect the screens. "What's this place now?" The cyborg's eyes glowed with an internal light as it spoke. "Now it serves a different purpose. We seek to understand the plague's true origin and prevent its misuse." "Let me guess," Leora said, crossing her arms. "The plague isn't human-made after all." The cyborg turned to face her. "No, but it was unleashed by those who feared your kind. They sought to blame humanity to unify the galaxy against you." Leora shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Of course it was. Nothing like good old-fashioned fear-mongering to bring people together. The truth you seek is hidden in these files," the cyborg said, gesturing to the monitors. "But be warned, knowing the truth may not save you. It's never that simple, is it?" Leora sighed, stepping forward to begin sifting through the data. "Still, I'll take my chances. I've got a species to disappoint after all." As the information flowed across the screens, Leora felt the weight of knowledge settle on her shoulders. The plague, the conspiracy, the looming threat, it was all part of a tangled web spun by those who thrived on chaos. "Spindle, get ready to download everything," she instructed, determination stealing her voice. "We're about to blow this conspiracy wide open." "With pleasure, Doctor," Spindle replied, already processing the data. "Let's show them what a human with nothing to lose can do." Leora smirked, her mind a whirl of plans and retorts. The galaxy may have turned its back on humanity, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. Not when there was a fight to be had and a truth to uncover. As she worked, the cyborg watched her with an expression akin to curiosity. "You're different from the others, human." "Different is just a polite way of saying trouble," Leora replied, never breaking her stride. "But thanks. I'll take it as a compliment." The cyborg nodded, as if satisfied with her answer, and turned away. Leora focused on the screens, her heart pounding with the thrill of the unknown. "Hey, Spindle," she said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "You ever feel like we're the heroes of a really twisted story?" "Only every day, Doctor," Spindle replied. "Now let's make sure it's a story worth telling." With the truth within reach and a galaxy waiting for answers, Leora Vex knew one thing for certain. They were just getting started, and she planned to enjoy every sarcastic moment of it. Leora Vex was beginning to wonder if her life had ever been normal. Standing in a dimly lit chamber with an AI in her head and a cyborg that had just turned its back on her, she felt like the poster child for how not to live a quiet life. But then again, quiet was overrated, right? "Spindle," she began, her voice a low murmur. "I think we need someone who knows more about biology than I do, and less about how to piss off every species in the galaxy. Would you like me to search for a biologist with those exact qualifications? I'm sure they are in high demand," Spindle replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just find me someone who knows their way around alien plagues," Leora retorted. "Preferably someone who doesn't mind a little chaos." As she sifted through data, Spindle processed the request, quick as a thought. "There's an alien biologist named Quarax in the city. Not exactly reputable, but who is these days? Quarax. That sounds promising. Does he have a last name, or is he one of those single-name types?" Leora asked, a wry smile playing on her lips. "Just Quarax," Spindle confirmed. "Apparently he's a bit of a wild card, likes to experiment outside the lines." "Perfect," Leora said, rolling her eyes. "Let's hope he's not the type who blows up labs for fun." Leora left the old facility behind, the cyborg's words echoing in her mind like a catchy yet unpleasant tune. She had a feeling this Quarax was going to be another piece of the puzzle, or a complete waste of time. Either way, it'd be interesting. Synapse Prime, with its neural spires and perpetual tension, was alive as ever, buzzing with secrets and lies. Leora maneuvered through the crowds, her mind buzzing with possibilities and the occasional sarcastic comment from Spindle about her navigation skills. "In 500 meters, turn right, unless you're planning to walk into that protest," Spindle quipped, the protesters' signs demanding transparency from the Galactic Council. "Transparency from the Galactic Council? That's like asking a black hole to lighten up," Leora muttered as she adjusted her course. It didn't take long for Leora to find Quarax's lab, or as it was more accurately described, a glorified junkyard masquerading as a research facility. The building was a patchwork of rusted metal, blinking lights, and the faint scent of questionable ethics. "Well, this place screams mad scientist in about 6 languages," Leora observed, stepping inside. A cacophony of clattering equipment and muttered alien curses greeted her. In the center of the chaos stood Quarax, a gangly creature with too many limbs and not enough patience. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Quarax demanded, eyes narrowing suspiciously as he flicked a switch that sent sparks flying from a nearby machine. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of important work, Doctor?" "Leora Vex," she introduced herself, waving a hand through the haze. "I'm here for your expertise in alien biology and your lack of respect for rules. I hear you're just the right kind of unhinged for what I need." Quarax squinted at her, clearly weighing her words. "Flattery will get you. Well, it'll get you somewhere." "What do you need, human?" "A little insight into a plague that's being used to make humans the scapegoats of the galaxy," Leora replied, crossing her arms. "And maybe, just maybe, some help in proving that's a load of space junk." Quarax's expression shifted, the curiosity in his eyes betraying a deeper interest. "You're talking about the plague that's turning species against each other. The one no one seems to really understand." "That's the one," Leora confirmed. "I think it's a bioweapon, not some natural outbreak, and I'm going to prove it." "Bioweapon, huh?" Quarax mused, his fingers tapping a rhythm against his leg. "That would explain a few things, but why should I help you?" "Because if I'm right, this plague could be used to control the galaxy. And if there's one thing I know about scientists like you, it's that you hate being controlled," Leora said, her tone coaxing. Quarax's laughter was sharp, like the sound of glass breaking. "All right, Dr. Vex, you've got my attention. Let's see if we can unravel this cosmic mystery together." They spent the next few hours surrounded by piles of data, the glow of the monitors painting their faces with an eerie light. Quarax, for all his eccentricities, worked with a methodical precision that spoke volumes about his intelligence. "So, we're looking for anomalies in the genetic structure of the virus?" Quarax asked, his eyes scanning the lines of code. "Exactly," Leora replied. "Something that screams I was engineered in a shady lab by a lunatic with delusions of grandeur. Based on what I'm seeing, there are definitely signs of manipulation," Quarax noted, pointing at a particularly tangled sequence. "This isn't nature's work. Someone's had their claws all over it." "Great," Leora said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "We've got a lead. Now all we need is proof that can survive the Galactic Council's scrutiny, which, as we both know, is like trying to convince a star it's dim." Quarax chuckled, a sound that was surprisingly warm. "Good thing we're both stubborn enough to try, but we may need some physical samples, something tangible to present." "Fantastic," Leora groaned. "And where exactly do you propose we find these samples?" "Do I just stroll into the nearest outbreak zone and ask nicely?" Quarax tapped his chin thoughtfully. "There might be a black market dealer who owes me a favor. He's not the most reliable, but he's got connections we could use." "Black market," Leora repeated, feigning surprise. "And here I thought we were going to solve this mystery through honest labor and goodwill." "Honest labor is for fools and robots," Quarax replied with a smirk. "And in case you haven't noticed, we're neither." Leora sighed, running a hand through her hair. "All right, lead the way, Quarax. Let's go make some morally questionable decisions for the greater good." Together, they left the lab, the weight of their task pressing down like a heavy cloak. The streets of Synapse Prime were saturated with the usual chaos, traffic jams in the sky, and arguments breaking out over prices and pride. "How'd you get into this line of work, anyway?" Leora asked as they navigated the bustling chaos. Quarax shrugged, his multiple limbs moving in a way that suggested nonchalance. "I didn't fit in with the other biologists. Too many rules, not enough room for creativity, so I struck out on my own." "And do you enjoy it?" Leora pressed. "Living on the edge, playing fast and loose with ethics?" "Honestly, yes," Quarax admitted, a grin revealing sharp teeth. "There's something liberating about not being tied down by everyone else's expectations." Leora chuckled, the sound carrying a hint of understanding. "Fair enough. I guess we're not so different, you and I." They arrived at a rundown building that looked like it had been cobbled together from rejected architectural plans. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of desperation and questionable life choices. "Quarax, you slippery son of a star, what brings you to my humble abode?" greeted a rotund alien with more piercings than skin, his expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Lorak," Quarax said with a nod. "I need a favor. We're looking for samples from the latest plague outbreak." Lorak's laugh was a rumble that shook the walls. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Quarax, or both." "What's it worth to you?" Leora stepped forward, her voice steely. "How about the chance to be part of something that changes the course of the galaxy? And of course, a generous supply of credits." Lorak eyed her closely, his gaze calculating. "You humans always did know how to dangle a carrot. All right, I might be able to get you what you need. But it'll take some time." "Time is not on our side," Leora replied. "Make it quick and there might even be a bonus in it for you." Lorak chuckled, the sound like gravel rolling downhill. "I'll see what I can do, check back in a couple of days, but don't get your hopes up." As they left, Leora turned to Quarax. "Think he'll come through?" "Probably," Quarax said with a shrug. "Lorak may be a scoundrel, but he likes credits more than he likes trouble." "Here's hoping," Leora muttered. "Otherwise, we're going to have to come up with Plan B. And my Plan BS usually involve running and a lot of swearing." Back at Quarax's lab, they continued their research, piecing together fragments of data like they were assembling a particularly malevolent jigsaw puzzle. Each new discovery added another layer of complexity to the conspiracy they were unraveling. "You know," Leora said, leaning back in her chair, "for a galaxy that's supposed to be so advanced, you'd think we could handle a little thing like a plague without resorting to interspecies blame games. You're expecting rational behavior from politicians, Korax replied, arching an eyebrow. That's your first mistake, Leora snorted, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. Guess I'm an optimist at heart, or just a glutton for punishment. Maybe both, Korax suggested. But at least we're getting somewhere. This data could be the key to proving your theory. It better be, Leora said, determination hardening in her voice. Because if we don't figure this out, humanity's going to be in a galaxy-sized heap of trouble. The Iors blurred together, their work punctuated by cynical jokes and the occasional burst of inspiration. They were an unlikely team, a human scientist and a rogue alien biologist, driven by a shared goal and a mutual disdain for authority. As dawn broke over Synapse Prime, painting the city in shades of gray and uncertain promises, Leora knew one thing with certainty. They were far from finished, but they were closer than they'd ever been. And in a galaxy teeming with secrets, that was worth more than a dozen flawless victories. The skyline of Synapse Prime was in a perpetual state of disarray, much like Leora's desk, only larger, more metallic, and with slightly less caffeine stains. The neural spires jutted into the sky like the universe's most aggressive middle fingers, a testament to the city's love-hate relationship with gravity. Leora and Korax trudged through the streets, the pavement buzzing beneath their feet like an annoyed hive. So, do you think this conspiracy goes all the way to the top? Leora asked, weaving through a crowd that had all the grace of a malfunctioning droid. Doesn't everything nefarious? Korax replied, his voice barely a notch above a whisper, as though the very air might try to eavesdrop. It's like an unwritten rule of the universe. If something smells rotten, there's a bureaucrat at the bottom of the pile. Bottom or top, Leora smirked. Sometimes hard to tell the difference. Korax snorted, a sound like a pneumatic wrench giving up on life. Depends on whether they're hanging upside down or not. Their destination was an unremarkable sliver of a building wedged between two larger, equally unimpressive edifices. It was the sort of place you'd pass by without a second glance, which was precisely why it was ideal for a secret meeting about galactic-scale treachery. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of desperation and burnt coffee, a combination that was either invigorating or nauseating, depending on your mood and how many brain cells you were willing to sacrifice to the cause. They settled in a dimly lit corner, the holographic interface on the table flickering like a cheap horror holo. Leora fidgeted, tapping a rhythm that only she seemed to understand. So what have we got? She asked, eyes scanning the room for any signs of familiar faces, friendly or otherwise. Korax pulled up a series of documents, the holographic display casting ghostly patterns across his alien features. More data on the plague's genetic structure. It points to some tampering all right, but there are gaps. Big, gaping, we're utterly screwed kind of gaps. Love those, Leora said dryly. They're like plot holes, only less entertaining and more likely to get us killed. Indeed, Korax agreed. But there's something else. Strange fluctuations in the city's energy grid, coinciding with reports of the plague spreading faster in those areas. Leora leaned closer, intrigued. Like it's being directed. Or maybe powered by something, Korax shrugged, a complex gesture involving too many limbs for human comfort. Possibly, could be a coincidence, but that seems far too generous a word for Synapse Prime's usual modus operandi. And the anomalies, Leora pressed. Any idea what's causing them? Your guess is as good as mine, Korax replied. But whatever it is, it's disrupting the Spire network. Like something's trying to use the city's own nervous system against it. Leora's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that seemed intent on remaining frustratingly incomplete. Maybe it's not just a bioweapon. Maybe it's part of something bigger, a way to bring the city and maybe the galaxy to its knees. Charming thought, Korax said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Whoever's behind this must have a truly dismal view of the universe. I can respect that. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. a flicker of shadow and light that suggested a rather dramatic exit or entrance, depending on one's perspective. "Think that's for us?" Leora asked, casually reaching for the concealed weapon tucked into her jacket. "With our luck." "Absolutely," Quarex replied, tapping the display to archive their progress. "Shall we see who or what the universe has decided to throw at us this time?" They stepped out of the building just in time to witness a hovercraft crash into a nearby structure, the resulting explosion as subtle as a politician's ego. Leora winced, shielding her eyes from the fiery spectacle. "Well, that's one way to announce your arrival," she commented, watching as a figure emerged from the wreckage, dusting off debris like it was nothing more than an inconvenient hiccup in their day. The figure approached with a swagger that suggested either immense confidence or utter disregard for personal safety. Upon closer inspection, the latter seemed more likely. "Doctor." "Vex, I presume?" the stranger called, their voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Depends on who's asking," Leora replied, her tone cautious. "Call me Vin," the stranger said, flashing a grin that was either charming or predatory. "I hear you're stirring up trouble. I like trouble." "You must be new in town," Leora quipped. "Here they like to call it business as usual." Vin laughed, a sound that was either genuine or a practiced deception. "They're not mutually exclusive." "So, what do you want?" Quarex interjected, his posture suggesting readiness for either conversation or conflict. "Information," Vin replied, crossing their arms, "and maybe a shot at whatever you're cooking up." "I've got my own reasons for wanting to take down whoever's playing God with this plague." Leora exchanged a glance with Quarex, a silent conversation passing between them. "And what makes you think we'd trust you?" she asked, her voice steady. "You don't," Vin said, shrugging, "but you'll need all the help you can get. And I happen to know a thing or two about cosmic horrors that might come in handy." "Cosmic horrors, huh?" Leora echoed, the words tasting like bitter irony. "Can't say I've had the pleasure of meeting one, but I hear they are delightful conversationalists." Vin snorted. "Oh, they're a real treat. And if this plague's linked to them, we're in for one hell of a ride." "Well, you've certainly got our attention," Quarex said, his curiosity piqued. "Care to elaborate?" "Let's just say I've got a few contacts who've seen things," Vin replied cryptically. "Things that suggest this plague isn't just about thinning the herd. It's about summoning something far worse." "Summoning," Leora repeated, the word hanging in the air like an unwelcome guest. "As in, bring forth the apocalypse kind of summoning." "Something like that," Vin confirmed. "And if we don't stop it, the galaxy's going to have a front row seat to the end of days." "Well, that's just great," Leora muttered, rubbing her temples. "I always wanted to be a part of a universe-ending catastrophe. Really looks good on the resume." Quarex chuckled darkly. "We do have a knack for getting involved in the most cheerful of events." "So, what now?" Vin asked, their gaze flicking between Leora and Quarex. "Now we dig deeper," Leora said, determination etched into her features. "Find out who's behind this and stop them before they can finish whatever twisted plan they've set in motion. And if we can't," Vin queried, their voice devoid of the humor that had previously colored their words. "Then we go down fighting," Quarex answered, his tone resolute. "Because if there's one thing I can't stand, it's someone else pulling the strings of my fate. And because we're stubborn enough to believe we might just pull it off," Leora added with a wry smile. "Welcome to the team, Vin. Hope you like long odds and questionable chances of survival." Vin returned the smile, a glint of mischief in their eyes. "Sounds like my kind of party." With their unlikely alliance formed, the trio set off into the city's maze of secrets and lies, each step bringing them closer to the truth, and whatever cosmic nightmare awaited them. As the city pulsed around them with its electric heartbeat, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that they were at the precipice of something monumental. Something that would test not only their resolve but the very fabric of reality itself. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of hope, however small, flicker in the darkness. Because in a galaxy teetering on the edge of oblivion, Sometimes it was the most unlikely heroes who made all the difference. The neural spires of Synapse Prime were having a particularly bad day. Not surprising, given the clouds of billowing smoke that rose like distressed signals from the city's heart. Leora Vex, feeling as if she carried the weight of all those middle-finger spires on her shoulders, made a swift exit from a cafe that had seen better days and less bitter patrons. "What now, Spindle? Got any bright ideas?" she muttered, half wishing she'd been issued an AI that came with a mute button. "You mean besides running for your life?" "No," Spindle replied, its sarcasm practically dripping through her neural implant. "But if you're looking for an exit strategy, I hear heading towards the direction of fewer explosions is a good start." "Charming," Leora grumbled. Her gaze was fixed on the distant outline of the research lab, her sanctum of semi-organized chaos, where a chorus of alarms harmonized with the symphony of chaos enveloping the city. All that was missing was a conductor with a penchant for arson. Quarax, her alien companion, glided beside her with the kind of grace that made everyone else look like they were perpetually tripping over their own feet. "Does it seem unusually flammable around here, or is it just me?" Leora sighed. "It's not you. It's the universe's way of telling us we're in deep cosmic dung." As they approached the lab, a building that had once stood as a beacon of questionable architecture, it became clear that something, or more accurately, someone, had taken a keen interest in making sure this was a day she would want to drink into oblivion. The lab's entrance had been turned into an avant-garde installation of twisted metal and shattered glass, a masterpiece in the art of destruction. Leora shot a look at Quarax. "Looks like our work here is done." The alien's eyes, those unnervingly large orbs, narrowed. "I reckon whoever did this had a personal vendetta against interior decor." "I'm more concerned about the evidence," Leora replied, her voice tight with a frustration that threatened to boil over. "Everything we had on the plague, the anomalies, all up in smoke. Not to mention your collection of world's archaist scientist mugs," Spindle added unhelpfully. Leora rolled her eyes, trying to ignore the pang of loss for her favorite mug. "Spindle, remind me to install a sarcasm filter on you, preferably yesterday." The lab was a charred skeleton of its former self. Equipment lay strewn about, scorched and broken, like the aftermath of a particularly aggressive office party. The holographic displays that once hummed with data now flickered aimlessly, ghostly echoes of their past utility. "Whoever did this wasn't just trashing the place," Quarax observed, picking up a scorched data pad. "They were making a statement." "Yeah, and that statement is screw you, Vex," Leora muttered, kicking a piece of debris aside. Suddenly, Spindle's voice cut through her brooding. "Heads up, Leora. Incoming transmission, and it's not the friendly kind." A holographic image blinked into existence, depicting the smug face of a Galactic Council official, one who managed to look like a bureaucrat caught in the act of embezzling funds from a charity for orphaned kittens. "Doctor." "Leora Vex," the man intoned, voice oozing with self-importance, "you are hereby charged with espionage and sabotage against the Galactic Council." "You've got to be kidding me," Leora snapped, feeling the world tilt on its axis. "I couldn't sabotage my way out of a paper bag." Quarax made a sound that might have been a cough or a laugh. "Seems someone's got it out for you, Vex." "And by someone I mean everyone," the official continued, oblivious to Leora's incredulity. "You are ordered to surrender yourself immediately for questioning. Or," Spindle quipped, "you could take the more scenic option and run like hell." "Spindle's right," Quarax said, already angling towards the nearest exit that wasn't on fire. "We need to get out of here. Whoever's behind this has just made you public enemy number one." As Leora hesitated, staring at the ruins of her life's work, a flicker of anger ignited behind her eyes. "You know, I always wanted to be infamous, just not for something I didn't do." They bolted from the lab, a pair of shadows slipping through the growing chaos. The city around them seemed to share in their panic, its very infrastructure groaning under the strain of the anomalies that had begun to multiply with alarming frequency. "Good news," Spindle announced cheerfully as they ducked into an alley. "The city's grid is failing. Soon, none of the security systems will work." "That's good news," Leora hissed, breathing hard as they kept moving. "Sure, if you consider total systemic collapse good," Spindle replied. "Glass half full and all that." "More like glass shattered and used to stab someone," Quarex interjected. "But it might give us a fighting chance." The streets of Synapse Prime had transformed into a theater of pandemonium, with citizens of every shape and size caught in the grip of fear. Hovercrafts careened wildly, occupants barely in control as they navigated through a sky peppered with unsettling ripples, like someone had taken a cosmic paintbrush and smeared nightmare across the heavens. "Looks like the anomalies are having a field day," Leora noted grimly as they navigated through the throng. "Yeah, it's like a discount apocalypse sale," Quarex agreed. "Everything must go, including our sanity." Their path led them towards the outskirts, where the city's less reputable denizens made their homes. It was a district that smelled like desperation mixed with the faint, acrid scent of ambition gone sour. Here, the spires loomed less like middle fingers and more like old men shaking their fists at a world that had long since stopped caring. "This way," Quarex urged, steering them towards a dilapidated structure that had all the welcoming charm of a haunted outhouse. As they approached, Leora recognized the silhouette of someone waiting at the entrance, Vin, their new recruit in the war against cosmic idiocy. "Making friends wherever you go, I see," Vin called, their grin more feral than friendly. "Got any advice?" Leora shot back, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down like a lead blanket. "Yeah," Vin replied, gesturing for them to hurry inside. "Next time pick more boring friends, less likely to be framed for high treason." Once inside, Leora took a moment to assess their situation. It was less than great, which was an improvement, considering her expectations had taken a nosedive somewhere around the time her lab exploded. "What now?" she asked, trying to catch her breath as she leaned against a wall that looked like it might collapse just out of spite. "Now we lay low," Vin said, watching the street through a crack in the door. "At least until the council gets their heads out of their collective asses, which might take a while," Quarex added. "Given the density of said asses." Leora let out a shaky laugh, the absurdity of it all finding a way to seep through the cracks of her resolve. "You think they'll buy that we're innocent?" "Only if we can find who actually did this," Vin replied, a dangerous glint in their eyes. "And that means we need to dig deeper into this plague business, find the real puppeteer, and find them fast," Spindle interjected. "Because I'm pretty sure they'll notice when they're missing their favorite scapegoat." Leora nodded, determination setting her features into a mask of grim resolve. "All right, let's start by figuring out how this plague connects to the anomalies. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out who's pulling the strings." Quarex gave her a sidelong look. "You realize the odds are against us, right? Since when has that ever stopped me?" Leora shot back, straightening from her slump against the wall. "They want a villain, fine, but I'll be damned if I let them write the ending to this story." Vin chuckled, a dark, knowing sound. "Well then, let's give them a story worth remembering." With their unlikely alliance renewed, the trio began their work, hacking into synapse networks, cross-referencing data trails, and piecing together the threads of a conspiracy that seemed intent on unraveling the very fabric of existence. As the Iors bled into one another, the city beyond continued its spiral into chaos. Each anomaly, each flicker of failing light, a reminder of the stakes they faced. And as Leora sat amidst the wreckage of her life, she found herself fueled by a singular, unyielding thought. If the universe wanted to see what she was made of, then she'd damn well show it. In the heart of Synapse Prime, amidst the chaos and the ruins, the night stretched on, and somewhere in the dark, the faintest hint of dawn began to edge the horizon, a new beginning etched in the promise of defiance and the whispered hope of victory. Because if there was one thing Leora Vex excelled at, it was surviving against impossible odds. Leora sat cross-legged on the floor of their hideout, surrounded by a digital graveyard of flickering screens and damaged data cores. The place smelled faintly of burnt circuitry, a reminder that in the universe's hierarchy of failure, she was somewhere between a faulty toaster and a crashed warp drive. "This message," she muttered, tracing a finger over the cracked screen of a data pad. "It's like trying to make sense of a drunk's rant about quantum mechanics." Korax, perched on a rickety chair that seemed more likely to collapse from existential despair than actual weight, cast a glance her way. "Perhaps if we were drunk, it would make more sense. Seems to be a common requirement for dealing with cosmic nonsense." Vin, lounging against the wall with the casual indifference of someone waiting for either enlightenment or a bar fight, smirked. "I'd rather be drunk than deal with this sober. At least then I'd have an excuse for poor life choices." "Spindle," Leora said, not bothering to look up from the garbled mess of holographic text. "Any insight?" "Because honestly, I'm ready to start using this data pad as a frisbee." The AI voice buzzed in her mind, a familiar blend of snark and unsolicited advice. "I could suggest reevaluating your life choices, but I doubt you're in the mood. As for the message, it's encoded using an ancient algorithm, something older than the Galactic Council itself." "Great," Leora replied, rolling her eyes. "So, we're dealing with ancient cosmic mysteries. Just what I needed to spice up my potential life sentence for treason." Korax leaned forward, curiosity overcoming his usual air of detached superiority. "Any mention of this plague or the anomalies?" "Yeah," Leora said, tapping the screen where words seemed to swim in and out of focus. "There's a reference to some entity, a cosmic something or other that's been linked to both. It's all wrapped up in language so vague it makes political promises look like engineering blueprints." Vin chuckled, inspecting a particularly decrepit section of the ceiling. "You'd think if they were going to go through the trouble of leaving a message, they'd at least make it comprehensible. But no, let's make it cryptic and confusing. Keeps things exciting, I suppose. Either way, the plan's simple," Leora continued, doing her best to ignore the growing tension in her neck. "Find the data, expose whoever's behind this mess, and hope there's a tiny part of the galaxy that isn't sitting on a tribunal eager to fry us." "Simple?" Korax raised an eyebrow, his expression a practiced blend of skepticism and resigned amusement. "For someone not fond of life-threatening simplicity, you have a knack for finding it." Leora smirked, brushing back a stray lock of hair with the kind of confidence usually reserved for someone who's already fallen off the deep end. "What can I say? I'm an overachiever." The hideout's door creaked, letting in a draft that had all the warmth of a tax audit. Vin frowned, shifting back towards the door. "We'd better make a move soon. This place doesn't feel like it'll keep our secrets much longer." "Agreed," Leora said, standing and stretching the kinks out of her spine. "We need to get to the heart of Synapse Prime." Korax rose as well, his movements as fluid as a predator who'd never known indecision. "The central spire, it's where they keep the most sensitive data. Also the largest concentration of bureaucrats. Coincidence? I think not." "Wonderful," Leora muttered, rubbing her temples. "A high-security data vault with added bureaucratic hell. It's like a theme park for masochists." "Do we have a plan?" Vin asked, a gleam in their eyes that suggested they already had ideas, most of them ill-advised. "More or less," Leora replied, checking the time on a cracked wrist screen. "We get in, grab what we need, and hopefully don't get disintegrated in the process." "And if we do get disintegrated?" Korax queried, voice light but eyes serious. Leora shrugged, a crooked grin on her face. "Then we make sure to haunt whoever's responsible. It's the least they deserve." "Count me in," Vin said, their voice a blend of bravado and reckless enthusiasm. "I've always wanted to be a ghost that annoys rather than terrifies." "Right then," Leora said, clapping her hands together. "Let's do this. After all, what's a little treason between friends?" The trio slipped out into the city, Synapse Prime's night sky a tapestry of stars and anomalies, each more foreboding than the last. The path was fraught with shadows and whispers, both the humankind and the ones that lurked just beyond the veil of understanding. "City seems quieter than usual," Korax noted, breaking the silence as they navigated the back alleys. The streets were eerily empty, save for the occasional flicker of a security drone overhead, a reminder that even in chaos, someone was always watching. "Quieter means more eyes are on us," Leora replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're probably expecting us to make a move." "Good," Vin said, their grin visible even in the dim light. "Means we're doing something right." As they approached the central spire, its silhouette looming like a monument to bureaucratic nightmares, the air seemed to hum with anticipation. Or maybe just Leora's anxiety, hard to tell the difference these days. "All right," she said, turning to face her companions. "We split up here. Korax, you're with me. We'll head for the core systems. Vin, you cause enough distraction to make a supernova look subtle." "Consider it done," Vin replied, already moving towards the access tunnels that snaked beneath the city like the veins of a particularly neurotic beast. Korax nodded, his expression unreadable but for the slightest quirk of his lips. "Lead the way, Vex. I'm ready to see how much chaos you can cause." Together, Leora and Korax moved towards the main entrance, a massive archway that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. The corridors beyond were a labyrinth of glass and steel, each turn more sterile than the last. "Is it just me, or does this place make you feel like you should be wearing a suit and tie?" Leora asked, glancing around at the oppressive grandeur. "Only if you're into self-flagellation," Korax replied, "or if you enjoy being reminded of your own insignificance." "Both, probably," Leora said, grinning despite herself. "Now, let's find us some incriminating data." The core systems were housed in a chamber deep within the spire, guarded by layers of security that included retinal scanners, biometric locks, and the kind of tech that would make a paranoid dictator nod in approval. "Piece of cake," Leora muttered, more to herself than anyone else, as they approached the first security checkpoint. Korax watched as she worked, his expression one of cautious admiration. "You seem to have a knack for breaking and entering." "Comes with the territory," Leora replied, focusing on bypassing the scanner with a device that looked suspiciously like it had been cobbled together using parts from a broken toaster. "Remind me to patent this if we survive." Beyond the final security door, the core systems pulsed with a soft blue glow, the heart of Synapse Prime's data network. Rows of servers hummed in unison, a symphony of digital whispers that promised answers and untold secrets. "This is it," Leora said, stepping forward with a mixture of trepidation and triumph. "I hope you've got a plan for downloading and not just sightseeing," Korax commented dryly, though his eyes were fixed intently on the displays. "Already ahead of you," Leora replied, connecting her device to the main console. "Now let's see what the universe has been hiding from us." As data streamed onto her pad, each line of code unraveling another layer of the conspiracy, a sense of vindication began to blossom in her chest, like a flower made of spite and determination. "There," she said, pointing to a file marked with an innocuous label but hiding within it the keys to their salvation. "It's all here. The plague, the anomalies, the entity. Everything." Korax leaned closer, scanning the data with the sharp gaze of a predator sizing up its next meal. "And they thought they could bury this. Looks like they underestimated how stubborn a disgraced scientist and her motley crew could be," Leora replied, her grin turning feral. "Time to get out of here before they realize what we've done," Korax suggested, casting a wary glance towards the door. But before they could make their exit, the room's alarms blared to life, loud, insistent, and profoundly irritating. A voice crackled over the intercom, heavy with authority and disdain. "Dr. Leora Vex, please remain where you are. Your cooperation will be appreciated." "Appreciated my ass," Leora snapped, adrenaline spiking through her veins. "Korax, time for Plan B." "Plan B?" Korax asked, though he was already moving to cover their retreat. "Run like hell," Leora shouted, grabbing the data pad and bolting for the nearest exit. Behind them, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed ominously, a reminder that the universe didn't believe in easy victories. Together, they raced through the labyrinthine halls, adrenaline propelling them forward faster than rational thought. The spire seemed to close in around them, its sterile corridors suddenly far less welcoming than they had appeared. "Vin," Leora gasped into her communicator as they skidded around a corner. "We could use that distraction." Like now. No sooner had she spoken than the spire shuddered violently, lights flickering as the sound of distant explosions reverberated through the structure. Vin's voice crackled over the line, breathless with excitement. "Consider your distraction. Distracting. Remind me to buy you a drink if we survive this," Leora panted, narrowly avoiding a security drone as they barreled towards the exit. "Make it two," Vin replied, the line cutting out as another explosion shook the building. They burst out into the night air, the chaos of Synapse Prime once more welcoming them with open arms. As they fled into the shadows, the city around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see whether their gamble would bring salvation or ruin. And as Leora sprinted through the darkness, one thought pulsed through her mind, fierce and unyielding. Let the universe try to stop them. She had data, determination, and a crew as irreverently defiant as she was. In the end, sometimes that was all you needed. The night wrapped around Synapse Prime like an overprotective parent determined to keep its rebellious offspring in line. Leora and Corax hurtled down the narrow alleys, the city's tangled web of shadows doing its best impression of a labyrinth designed by someone who hated exits. "Think they'll miss us?" Leora asked, breathless but buoyant with the thrill of the chase. "If we're lucky, they'll just forget we exist," Corax replied, his eyes scanning for threats as they ran. "But luck's never been fond of us, has it? Not even on my birthday," Leora quipped, skidding to a halt behind a stack of old crates that had seen better days, possibly before the last Galactic War. "Let's hope Vin's distraction keeps them busy for long enough," Corax added, peeking around the corner to survey the silent street. Silent, of course, being the kind of quiet that promised trouble was just around the metaphorical, if not literal, corner. Leora checked the datapad clutched in her hand, its screen flickering like it had won too many drinks at a cosmic bar. "Got what we need right here. Now we just need to get it to the whole damn galaxy." Corax arched an eyebrow. "Broadcast it, you mean?" "You're not worried about the Galactic Council wanting to put our heads on spikes," Leora shrugged. "They'd need to catch us first, and I'd like to see them try. Besides, nothing like a bit of public outrage to get the bureaucrats scrambling. They hate exercise. Public outrage it is," Corax said, and they resumed their dash through the maze of the city. Their destination loomed ahead, a communications tower that soared above the skyline like a middle finger to subtlety. It was one of those places that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie, with its sleek design and flickering interfaces. Leora loved its audacity. As they reached the base, the entrance was predictably guarded by two sentries who had all the alertness of a narcoleptic sloth. "Think you can sweet-talk them?" Corax whispered, a smirk tugging at his lips. "I've got a better idea," Leora replied, pulling a small device from her pocket that hummed ominously. Corax chuckled. "You and your toys. Should I be worried? Only if it doesn't work," Leora said, pressing a button. The device emitted a low-frequency pulse, and the sentries dropped, their systems rebooting with the elegance of a crash landing. "That's one problem solved," she said, stepping over the unconscious forms. Inside, the tower was alive with the hum of electricity and the low thrum of machinery, a symphony of technological arrogance. It made Leora's skin tingle with possibility. "Straight to the top," Corax suggested, nodding at the elevator. "Elevators are for people who have time to die of old age," Leora retorted, heading for the stairs. "We're taking the express route." Corax groaned but followed, taking the steps two at a time. "You better not say this counts as my weekly workout," Trust me, Quarax, if we survive, you'll have burned enough calories to outlive a star. They reached the top floor, breathless and invigorated. The control room was a masterpiece of over-engineering, screens plastered with data readouts and blinking lights that could induce seizures in the infirm. "All right," Leora said, setting to work at the main console. "Time to say hello to our adoring public." Quarax stood guard, eyes flicking between the door and the windows that overlooked the city. "Let's hope nobody wants to interrupt your big moment." The data was uploading, slowly, like it was savoring the drama of the situation. Leora tapped her fingers impatiently, her mind racing with the implications of what they were about to do. "Spindle," she said, addressing the AI that had been uncharacteristically quiet, "you still with me?" "Always, Dr. Vex," Spindle replied with its familiar snark. "I assume you're about to do something profoundly reckless. Wouldn't be my style otherwise," Leora said, grinning. "Think you can boost the signal? Consider it done," Spindle replied, the lights in the room dimming as it diverted power to the broadcast. Leora tapped a few more keys, eyes darting over the screens. "And now we wait." The seconds stretched, each one a minor eternity, until the screen flashed green. The data was out there, slithering through the cosmos, ready to incriminate every power-hungry fool who'd tried to cover up the truth. "Done," Leora breathed, a victorious gleam in her eyes. Quarax let out a low whistle. "You really did it." "We did it," Leora corrected. "Now let's get out before they decide they want a rematch." They retraced their steps, the tower now a hive of frantic activity as alarms blared and systems rebooted in response to the unauthorized broadcast. "Looks like they noticed," Quarax remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Good," Leora said, a fierce satisfaction burning in her chest. "Let them chase their tails while we get clear." Back at street level, the city had erupted into chaos. Sirens wailed, lights flashed, and the air thrummed with a palpable tension. "Where to now?" Quarax asked, surveying the tumult around them. "We regroup with Vin," Leora said, leading the way through the crowd. "And then we celebrate, assuming we're not in a cell by sundown." They moved through the throng, anonymity their best ally in the sea of panic. The city seemed to pulse with life, each face a reminder that their actions had set something unstoppable in motion. "Not bad for a night's work," Quarax mused, an edge of disbelief in his voice. "Not over yet," Leora replied, though she allowed herself a moment of pride. "But it's a start." They found Vin perched on the edge of a fountain, looking entirely too pleased with themselves. "Nice fireworks you set off," Leora said, clapping Vin on the shoulder. "All in a day's work," Vin replied, eyes sparkling with mischief. "I take it you found what you were looking for." "More than we bargained for," Quarax said, leaning against the fountain with a grin. "But we've pulled it off." Leora nodded, her mind already racing ahead to the consequences of their actions. But for now, she allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. They had uncovered the truth, exposed the corruption, and hopefully shifted the tide in favor of humanity. "And now, we wait for the fallout," she said, a crooked smile on her lips. "And hope it doesn't crush us." "Always knew you had a way with optimism," Doc, Vin teased, slouching back with the air of someone who'd just won a bet. "Never said I was an optimist," Leora replied, her tone wry. "Just stubborn enough to keep going." The sky above was starting to lighten, a reminder that time was relentless in its march forward. But for now, the future was a problem for another day. "Let's get somewhere safe until we know what's coming next," Quarax suggested, scanning the horizon with a wary eye. "Safe," Leora said, standing and stretching. "A relative term, but sounds good to me." They slipped back into the city's underbelly, the chaos around them a perfect disguise for their retreat. The data was out there, the truth revealed, and for once, Leora allowed herself to believe that they might just come out of this alive. And maybe, just maybe, they'd even make a difference. But until then, she'd settle for not being vaporized by an angry bureaucrat. As they disappeared into the shadows, Leora glanced back at the skyline of Synapse Prime, its spires reaching towards the heavens like questions demanding answers. and she vowed that, one way or another, they'd find them. Because if there was one thing she'd learned, it was that the universe never made a plan it couldn't unmake, and neither did she. As dawn clawed its way over the jagged spine of Synapse Prime, the city was a mess of blinking lights and blaring sirens. The Galactic Council had been graciously informed of their little escapade, and the bureaucratic behemoth was now shuffling its paperwork with a newfound urgency. Public outrage had reached a fever pitch, and Leora Vex was starting to feel like she just tossed a match into a very dry haystack. Leora, Korax, and Vin had retreated to a less conspicuous hideout, one of those little nooks in the city that was as forgotten as a well-intentioned New Year's resolution. Here, they could hear the city's chaos as a distant hum, like an angry hive of bees had taken up residence in the urban sprawl. "You think they'll thank us?" Vin mused, sprawled across a battered sofa that looked like it might have seen action in the last Galactic War. "Thank us." Leora snorted, leaning against a wall that had seen its fair share of graffiti. "They'll probably want to put us in a museum as a cautionary tale." "Here lies the team that gave middle management a heart attack," Korax chuckled, polishing a small gadget that looked suspiciously like a weapon, and a kitchen appliance had a particularly traumatic merger. "We did make quite the splash. I'm sure the council loves us as much as a tax audit." Leora pushed away from the wall and began pacing the room. "Still, it's done now. The truth's out there, and for once, it's not the ramblings of a conspiracy nut with a blog and too much free time." "And what about the cosmic entity?" Vin asked, scratching their chin with a grease-stained finger. They were the kind of person who could find a way to look disheveled even in a spacesuit. Leora's expression turned thoughtful, a shadow of doubt flitting across her face like a cloud over a sunny day. "That's the question, isn't it? We've exposed the corruption, but we've also stirred something bigger. Something that makes me wish I'd taken up knitting instead. Knives and needles both can stitch things up," Korax quipped, ever the philosopher of the absurd. The door of the hideout creaked open, and a familiar face poked through. Dr. Leora Vex, the scientist whose penchant for chaos surpassed even her twin. It was a long-running family joke that her lab was the only place in the universe more cluttered than Leora's thoughts. "What is it with you and trouble, Doctor?" Vex asked, stepping inside with the air of someone who'd just been told their favorite research project had been cancelled due to creative differences with reality. "We keep each other company," Leora replied, grinning. "Anyway, you're here now. What's the word from the lab, Doctor?" Vex sighed, a sound that seemed to contain the weight of entire galaxies. "The good news is that the Council's lifted restrictions on humans. Turns out when you expose a galaxy-wide cover-up, they're forced to reconsider their stance. And the bad news?" Vin prompted, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Vin trusted good news about as much as a cat trusted a bath. "The bad news is that this cosmic entity seems interested in humans. Whatever it is, it's been linked to the anomalies, like it's playing a game of cosmic chess, and we're the pawns who just realized there's no rulebook." "Well, that's just peachy," Leora said, folding her arms. "We're not just in the frying pan. We're being sautéed by a cosmic chef with a taste for drama." "Which means?" Korax pressed, fixing both Vex sisters with a look that clearly stated he hadn't signed up for intergalactic existential crises. "It means we need to be careful, Doctor," Vex replied. "We've shone a light on the Council's antics, but there are bigger players in this game. And some of them don't even need a body to move." Suddenly, Leora's neural implant buzzed, and Spindle's voice chimed in with its usual dose of unhelpful cheer. "Did someone say cosmic entity? Sounds like a party I'd love to crash. I'll put you on the guest list," Leora muttered, though she couldn't help but smile. For all its snark, Spindle was a mainstay in this universe of shifting loyalties. "So what now?" Vin asked, leaning back with the kind of casual bravado that came from surviving one too many close calls. Leora exchanged a glance with Korax and Dr. Vex. "Now we wait. The galaxy knows the truth and the Council's scrambling. We've bought ourselves time, and maybe a few enemies," Korax added, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Probably, Leora agreed. But we've also started something. A movement, perhaps. People are talking, questioning. That's a start, Doctor. Vex nodded, her expression softening. And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out what this cosmic entity wants before it decides to play its hand. Vin grinned, a mischievous glint in their eyes. Guess we'll just have to be ready then. Because if there's one thing I love more than a good heist, it's a mystery that threatens the fabric of reality. The room filled with laughter, a shared release of tension, a recognition of the absurdity they'd found themselves wrapped in. It was the kind of laughter that defied the darkness, a reminder that even in the face of cosmic uncertainty, they could still find humor in the chaos. Outside, Synapse Prime was beginning to recover, the city slowly stirring to life like a giant waking from a restless sleep. The lights were still flashing, the sirens still wailing, but there was a sense of renewal in the air, a hope that things might finally change for the better. Leora stepped to the window, watching as the city stretched its arms towards the dawn. She found herself wondering about humanity's place in the universe, caught between the bureaucratic whims of councils and the enigmatic intentions of cosmic entities. It was a thought that would have driven lesser minds to despair, but for Leora, it was simply another puzzle to be solved. Whatever happens next, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else, we'll face it together, echoed Doctor. Vex, Korax, and Vin, their voices a promise as much as an acknowledgement. Leora smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her, an unfamiliar sense of belonging amidst the chaos. She knew there would be challenges ahead, that the road would be littered with obstacles and uncertainty. But for once, she was okay with that. Because if the universe was going to throw cosmic entities and galactic treachery her way, she figured it was only fair she'd get to throw a little chaos back. And maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with more than just stories to tell. The future was uncertain, the path ahead clouded by shadows. But as Leora turned away from the window and rejoined her crew, she felt an undeniable truth settle over her like a cloak. They were ready for whatever came next, ready to face the darkness and light alike. Because in a universe as vast and unpredictable as theirs, the only thing more powerful than a cosmic entity was a group of humans too stubborn to give up. And that was a force to be reckoned with. As they left the hideout, stepping into the burgeoning day, Leora couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. They were outlaws, heroes, and possibly the galaxy's most unlikely saviors, a fitting title for a group that thrived on chaos. And so, with a smile and a nod to the city that had been both their battlefield and their home, they ventured into the unknown. Ready to face whatever awaited them, be it cosmic mysteries or bureaucratic nightmares. Because, in the end, they had each other. And sometimes, that was all you needed.